Hi everyone! It's been a little while since I've made a video about this doll's house. Mainly because it's been positioned in a place in my house where I haven't really been able to reach it. So it's now in a new spot near my dining room table so that I can access it and carry on working on it. So if you've not seen the previous videos in the playlist, I bought this doll's house second hand and I decided I wanted to change it so that it looked like an old warehouse that had been converted into an art gallery space at the bottom and an apartment at the top. And this is where I was up to. So I'd made this floor that was meant to look a little bit like a marble floor or a travertine sort of stone, and I still need to seal it and I need to add the skirting boards. When I moved the doll's house, I think I knocked this little light a little bit out of position, so I do need to glue that back in place. And I have some other little jobs that I'd like to do as well during this video. So this is the gallery space and I'd already made this stone floor. I wanted it to look like marble or like travertine flooring, but I want to seal it and make it a little bit more glossy and shiny. So thank you to everybody who in previous videos have suggested using Mod Podge. I didn't have any Mod Podge, I'd never used Mod Podge before, but I finally bought some so I can have a little practice to see if it gives the effect that I want. Now if you've watched my previous videos about this gallery flooring, you'll recognise this piece. This is a piece of cardboard, or foam board I think it was, that I used to test lots of different ways of making the flooring. So I'm going to use this piece of board just to practice using the Mod Podge before I put it into my actual doll's house, just in case it doesn't look right. So I experimented with a couple of different ways of adding this Mod Podge to this flooring. So first of all, I just tried adding it with the spatula. So this was quite a thin layer of the Mod Podge. I didn't want it to dry with obvious lines like this, so I did then get a palette knife which was a little bit wider so that I could spread it a little bit more evenly. Next, I practiced adding an area where the Mod Podge was laid a little more thickly. And after that, I tried adding it with a paintbrush. Once I'd finished these experiments, I did wash the palette knives, the spatula and the paintbrush with some soapy water, as recommended on the bottle of Mod Podge. I then left this to dry and went and worked on a couple of the other jobs that needed doing. So here I needed a piece of wood to cover up where the electrics are for the lights. So I painted this piece of wood. At this point I wasn't quite sure how I was going to attach it in place. If you've watched the previous videos in this playlist, you might know that I had already made a piece of wood to go across the front, but I'd had to join two pieces of wood together. And I found that it wasn't really strong enough to cover that area without concertinaing and folding in half where I joined the two pieces of wood. I also painted this area. Now on this area here, there previously was some wallpaper which I'd removed. Unfortunately, it hadn't really left a smooth surface. So I've painted this white for now, but I am tempted to maybe go back and add some brickwork to this side. I might then paint the brickwork white so that it looks like sort of a brick wall that's internal. Let me know what you think. I'm not sure whether to do that or not. I also painted this little door so that it matched the window frames, and I tried painting inside the window frames as well. But I do have a little bit of a problem here. So the little windows that are in place have quite a lot of marks on them. This one also had a tiny piece of blue tack stuck on the other side of the wood, in between the wood and the window here. And you can see some of the scratches on the window. I did try washing off what I could, but I think some of the marks aren't removable. I think some of them are scratches. I managed to remove some of the paint that I'd got onto the windows when I was painting the frames, but I don't know whether I should maybe just remove the plastic completely and have sort of open windows, because this would then allow me as well to paint the wooden frames that are on the other side of the windows. So I'm not too happy with the fact that the frames around the windows are one colour, but then the little bars that go across are a different colour. So I tried pushing the plastic out, but it does seem like it's quite firmly in place. Of course, I still need to make a little window to go here, so I need to decide whether to make some wooden bars to go across to match the other windows or whether to do something completely different. I had some suggestions of doing a little stained glass window. I love that idea, and now that I've actually learned how to make copper foiled stained glass art, I would love to do that in that space, but unfortunately I don't have the equipment. I also do need to do a little bit of painting around the edges of the doll's house, so I've got lots of tiny jobs that I still need to do. When this was dry, I decided that it had the effect that I wanted. It made a nice glossy texture, so I added the Mod Podge to the gallery floor. As you can see, I put far too much Mod Podge onto the floor here, so I did end up removing some of it and popping it back into the bottle. There were some areas where the floor wasn't completely even and there were kind of little craters, like the surface of the moon. And so the Mod Podge had filled these areas, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this looks. I'm hoping that it just creates a nice kind of transparent effect over those areas. So I left it to dry. And when it was dry the next day, this is how it was looking. Now I'm aware that the front edge isn't very even at the moment. I still need to paint green along the front just to make that nice and even and neat. So this is how the surface is looking. I'm really pleased with it. I feel like the areas where the gold paint sort of marbled into the stone, they really look lovely now that they're nice and shiny. What do you think? Next it was time to add the skirting boards. So I'd already painted the pieces of wood that I wanted to use for the skirting boards. I just needed to trim them to size. I'm about to use a little craft knife here. Obviously, please don't copy my technique. I'm not an expert, it is just a hobby. I was going nice and slowly and carefully to try and keep myself safe. So I was just using balsa wood, which is nice and light and quite easy to cut, and I wanted to try and cut at an angle. I would be really grateful if anyone could leave any suggestions in the comments for how to cut at a slight angle. Is there any equipment that I could use to help me with this? Because I wanted it to be at an angle so that it would match the other piece of wood that would meet it at 90 degrees. But I've just done this by kind of estimating, but I don't know if there's an actual tool that I could have used here to help me. So any suggestions or recommendations would be really appreciated. Thank you. I sanded down these edges to make sure that they were nice and smooth and also to make sure that the angles met correctly. And then it was time to pop them in place in the doll's house. Before sticking them down, I did put them in place just to check that they were the correct size. Now, something that I didn't think about was the fact that the floor wasn't completely even. And this means that there's a tiny little gap at the bottom of the skirting boards. I don't know if you can see it. Now, I'd rather that gap wasn't there. So I don't know whether to try and get some polyfiller and to fill that space. But obviously I don't want the filler to really get onto the floor area. Please do let me know what you think in the comments, because I'm not quite sure whether I should have a go at filling this area or not, or whether I should just leave it. At this point I also just added the tiniest little bit of glue to help the light to stick back in place. And now it was time to add the piece of wood to go in front of the light switch. So I'd trimmed this piece of wood down to fit into the little gap because I thought maybe I could just push it into place. It did fit, but it doesn't look neat. So I don't know whether to maybe make a sign to go in front of this. I might have to make it out of paper so that it's thin so that the door will still shut properly. But I thought if maybe I put a sign that will run all the way across here, it could be maybe a sign for the art gallery, that this would cover up this area, but it still obviously needs to be removable so that I can access the light switch. I'm not quite sure what to do with this section, but at the moment it really is not neat enough. So again, any suggestions would be appreciated. So this is how the gallery space is looking. I still have some little jobs to do, so I need to decide whether to add some filler along the bottom of the skirting board. I also need to paint this bit of the path because it's chipped away when I've moved the doll's house. I need to decide what to do with the windows, so whether or not to... I could remove the windows and paint the inside of these bars, or I could actually make some new wooden bars to go on this side of the window. I also need to make the little window for the middle. And I need to paint green all around the edge again because it needs another coat just to make it nice and neat. So I've got lots of things to do, but this afternoon I'm actually going to be finishing making the roof tiles to go at the back of the roof because they're not in place yet. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed the video. Please let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for this doll's house, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks again. Bye!